Welcome to week 9. This week we'll be delving further into artography as both a methodological approach and an orientation to pedagogy. So we'll be revisiting Spring A. Irwin and Kind's article called Artographers and Living Inquiry, and we'll be complementing this article with their other article called Artography as Living Inquiry Through Art and Text. And then we'll also be spending some time thinking with Dai Rong Wu's article in the INSEA Online magazine called When Teachings Become Form, Concepts, Actions, Conversations, and Works. So by Saturday at 11:55 p.m., post a link to Portfolio Entry 7. And then by Sunday at 11:55 p.m., participate in your group's 1-hour virtual collaboratory, and then respond to one other portfolio entry. So in artographic orientation, researchers and teachers consider that a concept is not formulated in isolation, as we discussed last week. Rather, as Deleuze and Guattari write, a concept is, quote, an act of thought, end quote, which emerges through an experimental doing. In this way, artography is a practice that thinks, according to Manning, and as such takes on a significant methodological shift from the use of concepts to frame or prescribe methods toward a radically inventive pedagogy of the concept. So artography brings a commitment to illustrate what Spring A calls meaning as an exposure that is never yet known through experimental forms of art practice. So artographic research attends intimately to concepts in the making and their emerging ontological formations. These formations are never whole, stable, or separate from the researcher, as we've discussed in previous classes. And furthermore, drawing again on Haraway's work on feminist objectivity, both the researcher and her emerging conceptualizations are eternally partial, as both are in part and only a part of the world that she studies. So as we've discussed before, this partiality is not meant to be controlled or regulated. It's a central quality of an artographic orientation. And as such, artographic researchers very much value their embodied implication in all facets of the research process and attend closely to the sensorial affects of movement with materials, suggesting that, as Irwin writes, to see movement is to feel the body in relation to potential. So artography has emerged as a creative practice, a research methodology, and a performative artistic pedagogy. So a process of inquiring that lingers in liminal spaces between artist, researcher, and teacher. So the forward slashes in artography aim to draw attention to these interstitial states, movement, and the temporality of meaning as it forms through artistic practice. Yet, unlike many other arts-based research methodologies which utilize art to signify children's realities or as representations of findings, artography reconfigures how artistic practices are applied in research and in pedagogy with children, as it doesn't seek the portrayal of a subject, but more so a disruptive reconfiguration of its contours. So artography is not determined by a set of particular processes. Rather, it acts as, quote, a tangential thread, as Spring A. Irwin and Kind write, that has been stitched together and unraveled across multiple forms. So artography has been and can be weaved across a variety of artistic disciplines. Scholars have taken up artography to reconceptualize pedagogical practices through research with sculpture, poetry, textiles, visual arts, and public art forums. Furthermore, artography is not a formulaic methodology, as I said previously. Though the process of art making, and through the process of art making, Artographers are in constant relation with materials in ways which provoke difficult and complex questions that can't be answered by, quote, straightforward or linear tellings, end quote. And that's by Springay Oroninkind from this week's reading. Artography aims to cultivate curiosities that are not yet known, so areas of knowledge which Judith Butler has described as straying from traditional regimes of representational knowledge toward more possible futures to expand the very meaning of what counts as a valued and valuable body in the world, end quote. So in this way, artography requires a loss of preconceived methods where in absence the effectual agencies and relationalities of materials become a central presence in the doings of art, research, and pedagogy. So I think Stephanie Springay articulates this centering of material relationality well when she writes that in artography, the representation of research cannot be seen as the translation of experience. Instead, artographical research as living inquiry constructs the very materiality it attempts to represent. In other words, engaging in artographical research constructs the very thing one is attempting to make sense of. So this process of inquiry does not seek to relay what happened in an encounter with materials or ideas, but rather it alludes to what Phelan and Rogoff call a condition in which a researcher might find herself while doing, making, and creating.